Hey, this is Rywolf from Amarillo, Texas. I'm a blues musician and singer-songwriter, and you're listening to Talking Blues.
First things that strikes me is the fact that you're an early riser,
Oh yeah, man.
as
Early
witnessed
rising.
as witnessed by our email exchange yesterday. So, does that come from your coaching days, or is that just the way you are?
So I was an athlete my whole life, and a lot of times it was rise and grind. Get up and start putting in the work. And so, that was just kind of ingrained in me from a young age. And then as far as my coaching career, yeah, I was up at 5 a.m. Um, sometimes earlier to get to work and meet with the student athletes at about 6 a.m. and start getting to work. So I coached cross country for years and years and years, and you start early and you end late.
I wonder. I mean, your life as a musician now means that you're playing till late, often on the road, traveling a lot.
It was last night actually.
Yeah. Okay, so getting up in the morning, like at my age, sleeping in is not something I do very often or can do anymore. But what I do find is I wake up early, even if I stay up late, and then I'm tired all day. So I don't,
I
are
don't know
you,
what it is, man. I think it's maybe something genetic. My dad was the same way. I can function fine off 5 or 6 hours of sleep and I feel fine. I don't know what it is.
well, it's a good thing to have, especially if you're a musician, because I presume you have a lot of early morning to travel and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I think we got back at about it was about 11:30 midnight last night, and then we've got another show tonight that we're gonna go well past midnight. So yeah, it's just part of the life.
Yeah, and a very different life from what you used to before you went
It
back into
is.
music. I want to go back a little ways and ask you how you first. I know that music was around you all the time, but how did you first get into playing guitar?
So I was, yeah, music has been a part of my life, my whole life, and I was in choir in high school, and really enjoyed doing that. And I actually did that while I was doing athletics, so that was kind of a juggling act there. But went to college, and I had a couple friends that played the guitar, and I always loved writing, and I'd always loved being creative, and I thought, man, like I need to put all these things together. And so I locked myself in a room for like 8 months in college, and I got some of my homework done and studied a little bit, but mainly it was focused on guitar. And man, after 8 months, I decided to go start doing my first open mics. And so this was when I was like, early 20s. And so I started doing open mics and started to get some decent response on my songwriting and things like that, and thought, huh, maybe this is something I should give a shot. And so I did, and I started traveling a little bit, went all over the country, went from all the way from Seattle to Florida and back again, and circled the country a couple times, and did that for a couple years. And but during that time, this was like, I'm trying to think when this was early 2000s. You weren't able to put out music to the masses like you can now, and so it was about getting on the road and touring, and people listening to your music, and it was tough, and I really wasn't making ends meet. I wasn't making that much money, sleeping on couches and things like that. And I decided that, well, I think I'm going to hang this up and pursue a career in athletics. And so that's what led me to that path in coaching.
So what I find it interesting is that you, even though you had music in your life and you sang, I mean, you started playing guitar pretty late in life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't play early, like growing up. This was well after, gosh, halfway through college is when I started. But I was determined. I was like, man, I'm going to learn how to do this because I grew up around the blues. I grew up around watching BB King, and even though I didn't get to see Stevie Ray Vaughan, I got to see his band Double Trouble with Johnny Lang and Kenny Wayne Shepherd and all these great blues guitar guys. And I was like, man, I want to do that. That's there's nothing more inspiring to me, than these guys spilling their soul on this guitar. And so, like, I wanted to learn.
So, if I'm not mistaken, it was actually a Johnny Lang concert that made you think I should be doing this.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I was on the front of the stage, and I saw a guy that was basically my age, just absolutely spilling his soul out there, both with the songs and on the guitar. And I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. And it's so unfortunate. Like, Johnny Lang for me was such an inspiration, and it's so unfortunate that he's not performing now. And I know he's had some, like, vocal health issues and things like that. And I'm waiting for the day that he makes his triumphant return, but I don't know if it's going to happen.
I'm curious. Have you met him? Have you had the chance to tell him that
I
what
have
he meant
not,
to you?
man. I haven't. And hopefully one of these days I will cross paths, and I'll get to shake his hand and tell him thank you.
I wonder what it was about. I mean, you kind of touched upon it, but take me back to that moment when you're seeing him on stage. Is it his guitar playing? Is it his songs? Is it his singing? What do you think touched you so much that you thought, I want to do this?
I think it was his passion. Like, he was so authentic when he played, and it was like you knew, you felt his passion and his pain and his struggle. And it was like in an instant you could tell so much about this person, and he was speaking in a higher level, with a higher voice, and for me that was like, wow, if I can connect with folks that way, then that's the avenue that I want to choose.
Okay, so from the moment that you think, wow, I want to do that, to getting a guitar and starting from ground zero and learning how to play guitar, I mean, that's a long journey. Was
It's a very long, very long journey.
and did you think, you're fooling around with a guitar for a month and not playing very well in the first month?
Not
Are
at
you
all.
still thinking I can do this?
um I you know I don't know if I was thinking, can I do this at his level? But I knew I could sing, and I knew I could write. So I had at least two of the three um, parts of the equation, and so I just really honed in on that initially. And I was like, well, these are my strengths, so I'm going to focus on the melody, the songwriting, and then hopefully my guitar playing will catch up. I'll just keep working at it, and hopefully it'll catch up at some point. So, um, yeah, that's what I focused on. And I feel like the early parts of my career, and even as I made a return to music in the last 2 years, that's kind of been my strong suit. And it's not really until I got with my full band together is when I was finally able to display some of my guitar playing.
Okay, so you said that you knew you could sing because of your background with the choir. You said you knew you could write. Tell me about that, because I mean, what drew me to your music was your songwriting and your voice as well. But your songwriting was certainly something that I kind of focused in on. Tell me about writing songs. Did you attempt to write any songs before this whole thing, or while
Yeah,
you're
I
learning?
did. I growing up, my mom encouraged me a lot to be creative and write songs. So that there's even that she even has some recordings from the time I'm 4 or 5, writing my own songs, like my own, making up my own things, my own melodies, and just singing them with no music, no accompaniment, just coming up with melodies and things like that. But another part of it is I've always felt, I don't know, like, a lot of empathy and things, and I feel like I can um, get the lay of how people are feeling or what they're going through without much being spoken. And so I just feel like I've always had an ability to put those things into words and to stories, and so yeah, that's kind of where all that started. And I feel like, definitely that's one of my strong suits, and something I've leaned into.
Okay, so once again, we go back to that moment you decide you're going to pick up the guitar and learn how to play it.
Hmm.
You're learning chords and stuff, and at a basic level.
Just basic chords, yeah, 3 chords.
Okay, three chords, which is all you need for a great song, if it's the right three chords. But
Right.
how are you thinking in terms of the learning process? Is it about becoming a great guitar player? Is it about writing a great song? What's your focus initially?
It started with great songs, and I feel like personally, and you know, you learn a lot as you go up through this music business, and then you start learning that a lot of these uh, folks you look up to don't even write their own songs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're getting songs thrown at them, and then they start doing, which is fine, you know. But for me, that's not. I wanted to tell my story. You know, I wanted to have that connection with folks, and for them to know my story, and also on some level be able to tell their story. You know, because I don't feel like there's anything more impactful than when you connect with a song. And it's like, oh man, like I can identify with that, and you almost make this artist part of your life. You know, that's how you identify. That's how you maybe speak. Is you speak through other artists, and so that for me was something that was central and has always been central, even now as I'm leaning into the blues genre and doing some more stuff with the band. It's like, you know, I want to play the blues and I want to be a part of that genre, but I also want to write songs that are very meaningful. You know.
I get it. I wonder when you're sitting there learning once again because it's fascinating to me. At what point was there a point where you wrote a song and you thought, okay, this is who I am. This is what I've been trying to do. And if you reach that point, which I presume you have, at what point did that happen?
Yeah, there was a song that I wrote because I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the time, and I, I came to a point in my life where I had to decide what I wanted to do. Like, was I going to drop out of college and start touring the country? And I actually wrote this song called "Leaving Tulsa." It was called "Leaving Tulsa," and I started playing it at open mics, and it was about this situation. It was about, you know, leaving things behind and really going out and taking a risk and chasing this thing on my own. And it started to resonate with some people, and some folks were like, "Wow, man, this is a great story. This is, you know, I really feel this." And so at that point, I was like, "Okay, like I think this is the right path."
What were you going to college for before you took that?
So at the time, I was just going for a business management degree, and but I was also in athletics. I was playing football at the University of Tulsa, and so you know, it was like, well, I'm gonna have to leave this behind. I had, you know, I'd been offered, you know, a starting position on the team, and I was a sophomore in college at the time, and I was like, man, I'm gonna have to leave this to pursue this thing that I have no idea if I'll have any success at. So it was scary, man. It was like stepping off a cliff, but yeah, I believed in it.
So you believed in it. How do you start? Like, what does that mean to say, okay, I'm going to pursue this? How do you get gigs? How do you start touring?
So the funny thing is, I started putting some music out on MySpace. Does anyone remember MySpace?
Yeah,
And I had some folks that had taken some interest in the songs that I had written, and they got me with there was a booking agent out in Washington actually, and he was doing some stuff for a singer songwriter named Sean McDonald who was out there, and a couple other guys. And he said, "Hey, why don't you come out and do a little bit of touring with us, and you can open up, you know, the shows or whatever." So, and it was like a little college tour. So, you know, we went to like Oregon, Oregon State, Portland, Portland State, like all these universities around um, northwestern United States, and that's really how I got started. And you know, the thing is, like these guys had already been playing and touring, and so they had a built-in following. So, like for me to go in and open for these guys, you know, I was opening for, you know, with a pretty significant crowd, and it was the college crowd, and they were like, "Oh man, who are you? Like I've never heard of you." And so, you know, like they started kind of passing my name around and things, and so that's kind of how things got kicked off.
wow. So I wonder, before you decided to go on tour and you were doing open mics, were you doing any kind of touring at all?
No, no, I was doing none. I was maybe here and there playing some local coffee shops or something, but no touring. That was my first big, like, kind of invite to go tour, and so, but I was still just playing solo. It was just me and a guitar.
I have to ask, what did you learn from that whole experience of being
Um,
on tour the first time?
I learned that I needed to get a lot better. I mean, because like these guys had played quite, been playing a lot. Like that was their whole life, and for me, it was just kind of something that I was trying to do, and I was going to school, and I was, you know, in athletics, and so it was like, man, I'm gonna have to devote my time to this craft full time if I'm gonna keep up, if I'm gonna, do what I want to do. And so that was the decision that I made when I got back. I was like, I'm gonna do this full time, and but
So
yeah,
you do it full time for 2, 3 years.
yep, 2 or 3 years.
Um, got the chance to travel and see a lot of the states.
Oh
Um,
yeah, so I went all over the place.
any very memorable firsts?
Um, y- well, I guess there's kind of an interesting story. I got invited to go tour with a friend of mine down in Florida, and we were playing the University of Florida, and I never been on the campus before, but we're walking to the gig, and there's alligators all over the campus. Like they're roaming around campus, right? And so like I'm freaking out. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And they're, oh no, no, they're fine. They're fine. They won't hurt you. Well, I got to this sidewalk, and this alligator, and I'm carrying a guitar. This alligator starts like creeping towards me. And I'm like, oh no, 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 I can't do this. So I take off, man. I'm running with my guitar case down through the University of Florida campus, man. So that was an interesting experience as I was traveling, and that's amongst many other
I'm
interesting
sure.
experiences.
Okay, so you decide at one point or another after giving it a go that this isn't really working out. This is not.
Well, yeah, I just wasn't making the money that I needed to. I guess I'll
How
say that
how difficult was that decision on coming to terms with that?
it was hard. It was really hard, man. Because it's something that I wanted. I really, really wanted, and I felt I just didn't know how to make it work. And I even let me think here. Yeah, so I did. I gave it up, and I went back to school, and I finished school, and I decided, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get a career in athletics because I know I can do that, and I have enough connections where I can make a solid living. And so I said, I'll keep it as a hobby. That was my thought. I'll keep it as a hobby. Um,
And did
and
you?
so yeah, I did for a few years, and then I got hired as the head track and field coach at West Texas A&M, which is Division II school, and that's where I live now here in Canyon. But um, I got hired. It was a full time position. We were starting a new program, and I I I did some. I still did some gigs here and there around town,
And you're still
and
writing.
I'm still writing. But at one point, I think it was probably 2 years after I got hired, I was like, I have to totally dedicate myself to this coaching thing because it was just well, one, it was paying the bills, and two, it required all of my focus. And so at that point, man, I hung up the guitar, I put it in the closet, and I don't think I saw it for another 8 years.
I wonder what your relationship to music was at that point, because I don't know if one becomes a little bitter about the idea or you just take it in completely differently.
I think you
Um,
probably hit the nail on the head, man. I was a little bitter about it because I was like, man, and the other thing about me is when I go into something, I go all in. And if I can't go all in, then I don't want to even mess with it because I feel like I'm not doing it justice and I'm cheating myself. And so, I mean, although music has always been a part of my life and it always will be, and even as I'm going through my, coaching career, there's still this fire inside of me that wants to play music. And it's still there, and I'm always listening to my influences and still gathering in that information, but also I'm living. I'm doing a lot of living, and we can get into some of that too. There's some interesting things that my wife and I did that really taught me a lot, and um, but I wasn't playing music at the time. But I feel like it really brought me to a place where I am now, as far as my songwriting, where I can really dig in and relate to real life things, you know. And but that was all while I wasn't playing music. I was living, and that kind of inspired, I think, the songwriting that I'm doing now.
I mean, there is something to be said about living one's life, and like I interviewed somebody who's a jazz musician, and he said little kids don't play jazz, or they're not great jazz players because they don't have life influences. They don't have a
That
life experience.
that's
And,
exactly right,
and if
man.
you want to write songs, you have to kind of experience life. But what were you writing with your wife?
So I wasn't necessarily writing, but we decided after we had our daughter. This was, trying to think here, 2013, and I had been coaching for probably 6 years at that point. We decided to sell everything that we owned and go move out to a 20-acre plot of land and build a cabin. My father-in-law built it with our bare hands. We salvaged 3 or 4 barns. We tore down 3 or 4 barns, sold everything we had, and we moved out to the country and built our own little cabin. And it was a very small place, 500 square feet. Had a loft, a couple lofts that we built, and we lived out in the country and lived off the land for, like, I guess, 2 or 3 years out there. And um, just I don't know, like, and at that point, you mentioned you have a mother that's 100 years old. My great grandfather was just shy of 100, and my great grandmother was 98, and I grew up around them, and they lived off the land. They had a like a 40-acre ranch in Wynnewood, Oklahoma, and I love their lifestyle. Like, they were married over 75 years, and they depended on themselves, you know, and they had a huge garden. And it's just, to me, that way of life. After my granddad passed away, and we actually salvaged his house that he built in 1940. So we used some of that lumber from 1940, and we brought it into our cabin here
Wow.
in Canyon, Texas. And so I wanted. I think what happened, that was a catalyst for me, because I wanted to preserve that way of life. And so I
I
convinced
mean,
my wife.
I have to ask, was there something that led up to that decision? Because that's a big decision to make.
And that was it. That my grandfather passing away. My wife and I went and saw him. He was 99 years old. He was like 3 months shy of 100, and just, I mean, he was a great storyteller, and he also played the guitar. He was a gospel singer, and he picked, like, bluegrass guitar, and he still did that until he was like 97, you know. And
Wow.
so, like, just hearing him tell the stories, and just knowing his way of life, and growing up around him, and that was a catalyst for me. I was like, okay, I want to preserve this way of life. I want our kids to understand what it is to put family first and family central, and not be worried about all these other things, chasing these careers, chasing, all this other stuff. Not be worried about that, but about basically just kind of a tightening the home life. And so that's what we did. We sold everything and we moved out to the country. We built our own house, just like my granddad. And yeah, and then at that point, I started picking up the guitar again a little bit.
Okay, so how did you feel about coaching? Because I would presume being a head coach for the track and field at Texas A&M, I mean, that's a pretty heavy duty job. Did you love that? Were you
I loved
passionate
it.
about what?
Yeah,
Yeah?
I loved it.
Okay.
I absolutely loved it. I mean, it was a huge passion for me, and I feel like if there's been one thing that I've been really good at in my life, it's been elevating others and pushing others forward. And and that includes coaches and people that I worked with, and I always feel like I've been able to spot talent and push it forward. And so that was something that I was really passionate about. Now, you know, fast forward about 13 to 14 years into my coaching career, I got to the point where I was kind of getting burned out because it was becoming about more than the art of coaching. It was becoming more business and a little bit more political and things like just with the landscape of the NCAA and the things that were going on with student athletes. And I just felt like I wasn't able to do really what I was originally there for, at the same level. And so I started to get a little burned out with it. And that's kind of where I started to change my mental focus on, well, maybe I jump back into music.
But uh, did this happen because you were now living off the land, or
So
give
that
me?
was part of it. That was part of it. I moved out there, and when you no longer have a mortgage, that kind of gives you some freedom to say, okay, maybe there's some other things I can chase, and maybe there's some other things I can do. So yeah, I started thinking about it at that point. But at that moment when I'm thinking, okay, maybe I can get out of coaching here in a couple years, I get offered a Division 1 head coaching job at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. We had just won a national championship here at West Texas A&M, and then I got offered a Division 1 head coaching job, and I was like, oh my gosh! And the pay increase, there was a pay increase, there was like all these other incentives, and I was like, man, just at the moment where I'm like, maybe I can do this. I get offered this job, and then my wife and I talk. I'm like, okay, let's move down to South Texas. We've never been down there before. This will be an adventure. It's more living, I guess. And so we decided, and we had just had our second child, and so we were like, okay, well, we're going to move down to South Texas now. So we moved down to South Texas. We kept our place up here, but ended up selling it, and then um, we just kind of we started a new path down there. And so I spent 5 years down in South Texas coaching at University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. But that was the defining moment down there where I decided that, okay, my coaching career is over, and I am moving on to music. And it wasn't, and I did enjoy my time down there, but it was just the point where it's like, okay, I'm not going to take this any further. I'm not gonna move this any further because this is not where my heart's at, you know. And that really was something that became obvious when I was down there.
What year would this have been?
So this was really 2020, 2021, right when COVID was kind of hitting, you know. This was really opened my eyes. It opened my eyes tremendously because once they shut down the coaching, once they shut down all of athletics, the university, everything, I had all this time on my hands. I was like, well, what am I going to do now? And so I started picking up the guitar again and started writing. And I think there was one instance in particular. I think I was up at 8 a.m. playing the guitar. My wife leaves for work. She comes back like 6 hours later. I'm still the same place playing the guitar, writing. Like I hadn't moved. And she was like, "So are you going to do this now or what? Like, is this going to be a for real thing now?" And and the thing is, the things that were coming out of me, I was like, "What the heck? Like, where are all these songs coming from? Where is all this stuff coming from?" And it was just a different voice. It was a new, and I think it was because of all the living that I'd been doing, you know? And so she was like, okay, you've got to do this. You've got to do this.
How great is that?
Yeah, it was a cool thing. Yeah.
Okay, so where was she? Was she in your life when you at your first attempt during music?
No, not my very very first attempt. I met her out here in West Texas, where when I came out and I was coaching full time, that's when I met her. But the interesting thing is, I had still had some opportunities around town to go play some shows, and the first time we met, she met me at a show I was playing at.
Oh,
There was an advertisement on the radio that I was playing at this venue, and she came and saw me, and she didn't even know that I coached at the time. But actually, I take that back. She did. She had heard from a friend that I was coaching at WT or at West Texas A&M, and so she's like, "Okay, I want to go check this. This is interesting. Like he plays music and he coaches." Like, so yeah, that's the first time I met. Yeah, we met at a venue, but I was a full-time coach, so it was kind of a mixing of those 2 worlds, but soon after that, like, probably 2 years after that is when I decided to, coach full-time, I guess.
A few things strike me when when you tell the story. First of all, you know, 2020 and 2021 were very difficult for a lot of musicians, a lot of
Very
people.
difficult.
But for musicians, you know, like you, like your career was kind of shut down, and
Yeah.
musicians who spent their whole life playing couldn't play anymore. And and this is the time that you decide maybe you will pursue music, which is crazy.
I know, it's nuts, man, but, like, in South Texas, things didn't really shut down as much as I think they did across the country,
Hmm.
and so I still had opportunities, when I started playing, I actually I got with a booking agent, and they decided to sign me onto their roster, and, there were a lot of opportunities in South Texas for me to start playing,
And
and
how
so
did you
the
feel when you started playing again? Because you put the guitar away for years. You pick it up one day. How does that feel? Like, does it feel like home? Does it feel, oh, I can't remember those chords? How did it feel to you?
it felt better than home, man. It felt right. It really, really felt right, and even then, man, during COVID, I was playing so much because I was like, "I'm behind. I've gotta get back. I've gotta get back," so I was grinding and playing and playing and playing, and yeah, I wanted to play as much as possible, and when I started doing it, I was like, "This is it. This is what I wanna do. This is what I'm going to do."
Um, you said you kind of found your voice at that point, that it was kind of different from maybe the person that had toured many,
Yep.
many years prior. What do you think? I mean, you did say maybe it was life experiences, but do you have any idea why this was the new you that felt more like the musician that you wanted to be?
I wasn't trying to please anybody. I was going back to the things that I loved, the great songwriting, the Johnny Cash, the old outlaw country type of songwriting, and I was maybe a little rebellious at the time because I was like kind of disillusioned with the whole coaching thing, but at the same time, I knew that there would be huge challenges ahead too. So I was just kind of like, I don't care. I'm gonna go hit this nail with a hammer, and I'm gonna go do it. And I just kind of went back to my passions, man. The blues. I went back to the blues and all the soulfulness of that. And I just felt like all of these things had in my whole life had been leading up to this moment where I start writing these songs and I start playing this kind of music, and it just felt right.
Okay, so I'll ask this again. In this phase of your musical career, and you start writing music again and start writing songs again, was there a song that you wrote and you thought, oh yeah, this is it. This is who I am. This is my music.
Well, there's probably a couple songs that I can think of. You mentioned Two Wild Horses, a song that's really, really kind of based in the Americana genre. Um, but it's really a song about freedom, and it's a song about breaking free and living the life that you're supposed to live.
Hmm.
And my wife and I we've always talked about like this is our great adventure, and we're partners, adventure partners, and we had moved down to South Texas when my wife's from here and kind of left this behind, and we just kind of go do the things that we want to do, and chase the things we want to chase, and that's really what that song was about. And it got a lot huge, a lot of great response, especially here in Texas, and um,
Okay,
that
so
was
how
one.
does that happen? Because you decided to go walk away from music, and then you said, okay, I'm going to start again. And I don't know if it's because of social media, which I presume plays a big part in what you do, but
Yes.
you're somebody who is not a well-known musical entity, and all of a sudden, within a few years or a couple of years, you have like ridiculous amount of downloads and streams from Spotify. Like, how does that happen?
Well, I got well, one there's a couple things. I got that song on the radio, and it was on Texas radio and Americana radio. So various stations across the country and mainly regionally, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico. They were playing it a lot, and
Sorry, but how does that happen? You just send it to them and you say, "Play this."
I got with a promoter actually, a radio promoter who lives down near San Antonio, and he pushed it out. He loved the song. He was like, "Oh my gosh, like people need to hear who you are. People need to hear this song." And so he helped me push it out and got it to all the radio stations, and so they started pushing it out. And yeah, like started. I was able to go around like around Texas at least, and visit radio stations and do interviews and start doing shows and so my reach, I guess, started to expand quite a bit.
Uh,
Um,
It must be weird when things just happen so quickly.
Yeah, I don't know how quickly I don't know how quickly it should happen. I don't, like I don't really have a gauge of,
No, but when you went about doing this the first time, you spent 3 years and
oh yeah, like it was a
like that
grind.
that didn't happen, right? And then this time
Right.
you do this and before the year's over or whatever, things are happening.
Yeah, and I think I'm just smarter and the way I approach things and the way I promote music and the way I make connections, I think is just probably more meaningful and better than it was at that time. But I also did some collabs with some really great artists too, and that helped boost me forward. I guess I did a blues song called Blood Red River, and it was a song that about how I grew up and how I kind of fell into blues music and how I really wanted to do this thing. And I did a collab with a guy named Justin Johnson out of Nashville, and I sent him the demo just on a whim. I was like, man, this guy's got like 1.5 million followers on YouTube. I wonder if he'll do a song with me. And I sent him the demo, and he was like, heck yeah, man! Like, let's do this song. And so we did this song together, and I put it out, and it just exploded. It exploded on Spotify, and that really probably, honestly, that initially probably gave me name recognition. Doing that song with Justin Johnson.
It's a great song, and I guess it speaks to what you bring to the table. When I guess you didn't know him, you just reach out and say, "Here's the song. What do you
I
think?" And he
reached
says
out of the
yes.
blue. Actually, I reached out to like 3 or 4 really great slide players. And I was like, man, I really want some slide guitar on this. And I'm not good enough at slide guitar to do it. I want someone who's really good. So I reached out, and I got some interest from a couple really good players, but Justin was like the number one. He's like the one I wanted, and he's like, yeah, man, let's do it.
And you've done a lot of stuff, well, a few things with him
I
since.
have, I have. He's been really great, man. He loves my songwriting, and he feels like it fits his style too. So yeah, he's really helped me push my career forward, no doubt.
So when you decided to go back into this, was there anything you consciously thought, I need to do this differently than the last time? I know it's a different time physically, but like, was there anything that you thought, for me, I need to be different in this way in order to succeed this time and not get the same results as the last time?
Yeah, I don't really think I back when I very first started, I didn't really have an identity. I didn't really know who I was as an artist or what I represented. And now I feel like I have a very strong um, I mean, I wouldn't say identity, but I know what I represent, and with the songwriting and everything, I know what I want to say, and I feel like people can connect with that more
Is
than
that
they
is
could.
that the physical? Is that music or is that like an image?
It's both. It's both. I think the image and who I am and how I've lived, I think is something that people can connect with initially, and the songs are just part of it. The songs are kind of part of the story, maybe. And I think that goes for, a lot of artists if they want to be successful. Like people have to have something that they can connect to, right? They can connect their identity to. And so I feel like, I decided to kind of get out of this whole chasing a regular career, and just say, you know what? I'm going to go do this on my own. Like, I'm gonna go blaze this path on my own, and I'm gonna play the music I want to play, the music that feels like truth to me. And I'm not gonna try to please anybody. And I feel like a lot of people can identify with that.
How do you measure success? And maybe success isn't the right word, but how do you quantify all this?
Um, I don't know. That's a really good question. I just feel like as long as I'm doing what I love to do and I'm continuing to take steps forward in mastering this craft, um, that's success to me. Like, as long as I'm loving what I'm doing and I'm able to connect with people, then that's success. I don't
Because
need anything more than that, really.
well, the other thing is that I don't know if it's because you were away from music so much or for so long, but you've been quite prolific over the last 3 years in writing songs. And I don't know what that process is, but I think I read or heard somewhere that you were aiming to do at least one song a month.
Yeah, I do try to at least write one full song a month. And this album that we're going to come out with here in January, it's 14 songs. Some of the songs are songs that I've already written, but over half the record are new songs. And but yeah, I mean, I have songs. I probably have 150, 200 songs like that are in the queue. You know what I mean? Like that are just there, and they're ideas, or they're half done, or they're works in progress or whatever. But I'm always writing. I have two notepads by my side all the time, and of course my iPad or my iPhone. I'm putting notes in, and I'm doing voice memos and things like that, or I'm getting up in the middle of the night and recording videos. And it's I've always got things going on, man, things in my head, and I've learned that if you really listen to the things that your soul are saying, there's always great ideas that are there. And you've just got to be, for me, I've just got to be able to put them down and record them, every time they come to me, or otherwise I'll forget them because other things will come in.
So you started off being more of a solo artist, I presume, when you decided to pick up the guitar and do things,
Yes.
go back into music. And I don't know if you had a band before. I know you've played with bands, but how different is that, and how does that influence who you are and the music that you want to create?
Well, it's always something that I've wanted to do. It's always something it's always where I've wanted to be, is with a band.
Right.
And that goes back to the Johnny Lang thing. That goes back to the BB King thing. That goes back to seeing those guys, Double Trouble. That goes back to seeing that unit on stage, putting out that kind of music. That's always where I've wanted to be. So, although I did start out as a solo artist, as soon as I knew that I was moving back up to West Texas, I got a hold of. He's a legend around here. His name's Rick Fawcett. He's a pedal steel player, slide guitar player, and I always feel like that fit into my music is that slide stuff, slide guitar, lap steel, pedal steel. And so I got a hold of him, and I was like, hey, I want you to know I'm going at this full time, and I would love to have you aboard with me to start making music. And so as soon as I moved back, I think it was like a week after I got back, Rick and I were in the studio hashing songs out, working on stuff. And so, for about 8 or 9 months, it was just him and I traveling around as a duo playing. And, when we still do that, we did that yesterday, and it gets a huge response. I love doing it. But then eventually we came across some other pieces that are actually from around here in town. And our drummer and our bass player used to play with a guy named Zach Wilkerson, who's a really, really great blues player, and he's living here in Texas. And we convinced those guys to join up with us. And this was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 months ago. And yeah, man, once they joined us, it was game on. I was like, this is it. This is it. This is
Wow.
what I want to do. This is it.
Okay, so you have a new album coming out. There's obviously a buzz about you. Do you have goals? Do you know what you want to accomplish in the next little while?
I mean, yeah, I do have some goals, you know, and now it's not just me, you know, now I've got band members that are also on board and want to push this thing forward. So, you know, I think for us, we want to be touring, you know, we want to be touring and be able to take this music across the country and maybe even to other countries. If the response is there and if the reception's there and um, that's what we want to do, you know, and be able to bring this music to a wider audience.
And how
Like,
does one do that? Is it radio airplay? Is it touring? Is it
well, I guess that's why I'm here talking to you. You know, I've I've tried. You know, we've got this album coming out in January, and I've got it out there on a private link, and I'm trying to send it to folks that I think might appreciate it. Um, and and really, that's it. You know, like it just maybe start a buzz about what we're doing, and maybe say, hey, like this is something a little different. You know, this is something that maybe sounds familiar, but also sounds new and fresh. And um, so yeah, you know, just getting out there. And we want to try to get some radio play, and but yeah, just trying to get the music out to people that will appreciate it.
are there bands out there who not that you sound like, not that you're influenced by, but whose career you want to kind of shadow, mirror? You know
Well,
that.
you know, I love what Larkin Poe's doing. You know, they were just nominated for a Grammy, and they've been at it for a long, long time. Really, like
Hmm.
they started really young, and I think they were kind of really in the bluegrass genre initially. But you know, they do the lap steel thing, and it's just a great, great sound. And now their last album is just so stellar, and they're touring the world now, and so, man, what they've been able to accomplish, I just love. I think they're outstanding. And you know, there's other bands like the Black Crowes that I've always been influenced by, and just so soulful and passionate. And they're kind of from the southern United States, and I think we kind of have a similar vibe. I think that our audiences was probably, you know, I think they'd probably be close to the same. So yeah, you know, those are two artists that I can think of off the top of my head that, man, if we could do something like what they're doing, that would be a good spot.
So somebody who's not used to being a band leader, was that transition easy? Because I always hear how difficult it is to keep a band,
It's
but
easy for me. I mean, I've been building teams my whole life.
that's true.
It's not a it's pretty easy really for me, you
And
know.
has anything surprised you about being a band leader?
Um, you know, not really. It's really the same kind of concept when it comes to building a team. Um, you know, and the great thing I love about the folks that I'm playing with, the Prairie Hawks, is that we don't have a lot of egos, and we're kind of all in the same place in life, you know. So we understand the demands of life outside of music, and so I think there's a lot of when we get in a room, there's not a lot of ego, you know. And this album that we did, it's 14 songs. We recorded it over 2 days in the studio. We all got in the same room, and we did like 3 or 4 takes of each song, kind of like how they used to back in the day, and we recorded it, man, live. And you know, I don't think we could do that if our synergy wasn't great, you know. And I think that'll come through in the record. I think when people hear it, they're going to be like, "Wow, like this is a unit," you
Well, it's
know.
a great album. Tell me about the album, the name, when it's coming out, and where people can find it.
Yeah, so it's going to come out January 25th. It's just self-titled with a new band. It's just called Rye Wolf and the Prairie Hawks. A lot of blues, a lot of slide guitar. It's definitely a soulful album, and definitely going back to my roots on this one. But yeah, people will be able to find it on Spotify and iTunes and basically anywhere you get your music, you know. And folks that want to follow us can follow us at Rye Wolf Music on most social media platforms. And I'm very active on social media. I'm posting stuff probably daily or every other day about either where we're playing or things that we have going on, or even maybe doing a few BB King covers or Freddie King covers, you know, something like that. But But yeah, we love to connect with folks and love for them to hear our album.
Well, Rye, I'm glad you connected with me because now I feel like you have a new fan in your music, and it's a thrill just to meet you.
Well, man, I greatly appreciate what you're doing. I mean, I definitely did some research on what you're doing with your podcast, and the folks that you're bringing in are outstanding, man. I just I felt honored to even be a part of it.
Well, thank you. I'm honored that you are a part of it. So thank you very much.
You bet.